Hey guys, Cal here with a new video on Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Since we're only a few days away from the release of Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, I thought it was a great time to get back into this game and share my honest opinions of where I like certain things and where I thought some elements could have been better. Now, this is not to say that I completely hate this game. Please do not see it that way and get your pitchforks ready to defend it. I was one of the first people who played the game as soon as the timer hit 0, the day of the release, which was October 20th, 2023, and never have I had this much anticipation going into a game of my favorite comic book character in the world. But after playing it twice and having much time pass since the release, I feel like I can be honest enough to give my personal opinion on many sequences and missions in the game, and as you know, this channel is an open forum and you're more than welcome to put your thoughts on whether you agree or disagree with everything I have to say in the comment section. And please know, this is going to be a full spoiler video, so if you haven't played the game, stop right here and save this video to watch it after. But if you're still here and don't care, let's jump into it. Also, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel to be updated on any important Spider-Man 2 news or content. Let's start with the main missions, of course. Now, I'm going to be breaking the main missions into 3 acts. Act 1, with the first mission where Pete and Miles go toe-to-toe with Sandman, titled Surface Tension, and it's end in the mission where Pete gets the symbiote from Harry in order to save his life, titled Good Men. Act 2 begins from when Peter gets the symbiote to when Peter successfully removes it after an intense fight with Miles in the mission titled Anything Can Be Broken. And finally, Act 3 begins from when Harry gets back the symbiote to finally become Venom in the mission titled Don't Be Scared, to the final mission where Peter, Miles, and MJ face off against Venom in the mission titled Together. Alright, now that's out of the way. Let's start with Act 1. The game begins with an intense fight with Sandman. Okay, I think it's a great sequence. Why? You remember in the first game, they had Kingpin as the villain? In the first Spider-Man PS4 game, we began the mission with, Peter essentially trying to get Kingpin. It was a great start in that game. I'm not gonna lie, it really was a great start. And in Spider-Man Miles Morales, we had a similar mission where Miles and Peter were surveying a prison transfer which went wrong, and of course we fought Rhino in that game. And I seriously thought they couldn't top this off, but oh boy, I was wrong. This mission, it set the tone for the game in its entirety. Now, why do I say that? From the beginning, they gave us a villain in the beginning of the game that needed 2 Spidey. It shows why the game has 2 Spider-Man, because a threat like Sandman requires 2 Spidey to take him on. And not only that, I think one of the sequences in that fight where Sandman essentially throws Miles across the city, I thought that scene was so great. And even not only that, I think they used that fight as a tutorial to introduce us to the mechanics in the game, which I thought was a pretty innovative thing. Because it essentially, we were fighting Sandman, we were also learning new stuff in the game, and it worked wonders. And the fight was amazing. I mean, it was just great. Also, another thing that I noticed, and correct me if I'm wrong, in the game, if you go back to certain sequences, like let's say the Sandman fight, in the aftermath, you can see the city is like filled with sand and everything, and it makes me think that for this game, for the first time, they introduced like real life consequences to whatever the villains do to the city and everything. So if you remember in the first game, there was this helicopter sequence that they showed in E3 of 2016, and they used. I mean, if you finish the sequence and everything, when you played the game, you turn back and the helicopter's completely gone. Well, now, even after the villain's like done and everything, it's not like it didn't happen. It did happen, because you can essentially see set pieces, consequences of those moments that happen. Like in the first mission, you see Sandman, the city like covered in sand and everything. It's because of Sandman, right? Essentially because he attacked everybody in New York. Yeah, not only that, if I go ahead and let's say the prison sequence where Craven attacks for the first time on New York, and he's essentially trying to capture Martin Lee, aka Mr. Negative. And if you go back, you can still see the boat that catapulted. You can still see it upright, essentially. Like the tip of the boat is out of the water. You can see that, which I think is a great thing because it shows that these events they happen, and you see the city reacting to them. I thought it was a great touch by the developers, Insomniac. Come on, it's great. One other thing that I liked in this act essentially was the introduction of Harry. I mean, yeah, we got that great opening where he's essentially having a dream sequence. That was great. But I think how the game introduced to Harry, like in that Queen's mission, which I'll talk about in a bit. I thought it was a great touch by the developers. Why do I say that? Because it makes you care about these characters essentially, right? You have to make sure that you care enough for these characters to so when the ultimate face down does indeed happen, you're emotionally invested in their journey, in Peter, Miles's, but in this case only Peter and Harry's journey. So I think that Queen's mission was such a great touch by the developers because it made us essentially care for these characters. So when that final mission does happen, it makes us invested in these characters. And I also like that we went back in time to like flashbacks and everything. We were seeing young Peter and young Harry, and there was essentially a storyline there with Flash capturing the thumb drive with their presentation, and they essentially sneaking in at night to retrieve it. And they also introduced a young Peter and everything, his abilities. They kind of made a story where he was using his abilities, hiding from the guards and everything, which again was a great touch, and it provided some depth to the storyline as well. And talking about Harry, I think the actor Graham Phillips, who plays Harry, did such a great job in this game. I mean, I'll talk about that in later acts, but of course, this first mission in Queens, where they go to the high school, he essentially was Harry, I would say, because he embodied him so well, and the voice acting was just so incredible. I mean, come on, I can't sing enough praises throughout the game, but I think Graham did a great job as Harry, and I'll just keep it at that. Now, let's talk about Craven. I think Insomniac nailed the character to the T. Why do I say that? Well, if you look at him, there's no sequence in the game where he comes across as comic-y, because Craven is a difficult character to pull off, right? You can make him look very comic-y, a little bit of comic and everything like that, but he never came across as that. If he came across as anything, he was more mysterious than anything else. And I think that worked in favor for the character. Why? Because I think Insomniac, I think they made this decision to, showcase Craven, where their ideology was, essentially less is more. What I meant by that is they didn't go into depth why this character is the way it is. I mean, it's a character. You don't have to explain his backstory and everything. It's a character like that. And I think Insomniac really nailed that big part because it showed that a villain was not a villain because they had a terrible backstory or anything like that. A villain was a villain. He was just a villain. You don't have to show everything that a character does, what has happened to him. He's Craven. You don't have to show everything like that. And I think they really nailed that aspect. Especially if I talk about, Craven being the hunter, they highlighted that so well. Why? Because I don't know if you paid attention when you played the game, you see that he's killing off Sinister Six members. We see mementos of Vulture, Shocker, and Scorpion. We see a cutscene where he kills them essentially, and also Electro, if I mentioned that, because if you play as Mary Jane in that part of the game, you see mementos of these villains if you're paying attention, and also voice recordings by him when he chose to kill them, which I think really highlighted that hunter aspect, that he's the hunter and he's killing them. Essentially, Peter first thought in the game that he's recruiting these villains, and then we later finds out that he's essentially killing all of them. Though, if I wanted to play devil's advocate here, I think they shouldn't have killed Shocker, because if I was being honest, they could have used this opportunity to, do something truly legendary.
Surprise, Shocker! Get back here, Shocker! Shocker! can't escape me! I'll chase you to the ends of the earth! Hey, what is...
But I get that at this point I'm just trying to ask more from a universe that has nothing to do with this, but you'll just keep it at that. The next thing that I wanted to talk about was the introduction of Mysterio in the game. Because I never expected them to use Mysterio as a Coney, as a guy who was, essentially trying to restart a Coney Island ride. And if we talk about that mission, I think that was a great mission. Why do I say that? You remember how Miles' dream was to be a DJ? I mean, that's what he was, mostly thinking of be majoring in college. If we see those side missions, especially in the Brooklyn ones, he's trying to poach a teacher, not poach, but trying to get an interview from a teacher while he's doing a mission and everything. And I think this mission, it showed his dream in such a way that was fun to play, and especially, and also with Mysterio being, the center of it all, and his side missions. We'll come back to that later. But I think the way the game introduced Mysterio was a great touch by Insomniac. I really enjoyed this aspect, this part as well. And speaking on that, the Coney Island mission. Where do I even begin with this one? I think Insomniac deserves all the praise for this mission, is like one of these missions too, because these rides were like so fun, and I would have been okay if Insomniac didn't do this mission, because it also was like essentially a way for us to care about these characters. And boy, they did a great job with those scenes, those banter between these, Peter and Miles, Peter, Harry and NJ. That was great. And the games were fun to play too, of course there were like some moments that contributed to the story, but Harry hitting the sledgehammer and it just goes to the roof. It gives a bit of a sense of what is coming next, and moving the story. But as a fun mission, this was definitely it. You could go around playing games and everything. It was fun, that's what I'll say. And I think the introduction of Agent Venom deserves a lot of praise, because I didn't think they would pick that comic book storyline from this game. But of course, this is not Flash Thompson, because in the comics, Flash Thompson became Agent Venom. But this is essentially Harry, coming in the apparel of Agent Venom, which I thought was like a great creative liberty taken by Insomniac to introduce an element from the comics to fit into the story. I thought it was great, and we could have and the team up missions with Harry were just awesome. I know that the only problem with this one is that there weren't much of those, which I'm okay with. And if you weren't playing like in free roam, you could essentially play as Miles and team up with Harry. And I think a few people missed that opportunity to have that banter with Harry and Miles when you were free roaming as Miles during that phase. But yeah, I think the Agent Venom aspect in the game was great. And also moving on to that, we also got a team up with Harry and Peter trying to save Tombstone, which of course there's a whole thing in the game about supervillain rehabilitation, which I thought again was a great touch by Insomniac to address a matter which, you have these supervillains in the game, and there are of course many, but this introduction of rehabilitating supervillains, which I thought was a new inventive touch by Insomniac, of course. And it, of course, didn't serve much to the story, but again, it was a great touch by Insomniac. And finally, let's talk about that final mission at the end of Act 1, where Peter gets the symbiote. I think playing through the mission, I had no idea that Peter was going to get hurt like that. I was not expecting it. And the first time I saw it, I was like, what? Are you serious? He just killed him off, because I thought he would be injured or something. But when he literally died, I was like, whoa, what is happening? And then I heard the symbiote voice noise, transferring to Peter from Harry, and I was like, oh, I see what they're doing here. I get it now. And when I first got the black suit, I was like, oh yes, finally. And the first time I used it, oh, I could hear the vibrations from my dual sense controller. Because I don't know if you've played as the game, when you use the symbiote abilities, you have that vibration in your controllers, and you could feel the power of the symbiote, especially with those moves. It was just great. And of course, the Dr. Connors being the lizard in there was also a great mix of the things. And of course, we'll talk more about that in the second act. But for this, I had no complaints with this mission, and I especially have no complaints with this act. I think it served like the first act was amazing. There was no problems with me in it. If you think there's something that I'm missing here, anything I failed to talk about or didn't mention, feel free to write that in the comments. Let's talk about Act 2. As I said before, I loved how the black suit was introduced to Peter in the game. It was amazing. And of course, there are missions where you see the change in Peter's tone, his aggression, his selfishness and everything. You see the symbiote taking over Peter and everything. And I think Insomniac did a great job with, giving that side of him. Not making him especially, unlikable, of course, and kind of, if I wanted to use a better or a bad word, dickish, maybe. Not make him too unlikable and everything, which, of course, Insomniac did a great job in. They made him look, give him like that. You could tell that he wasn't himself. You could tell that aspect of addiction that, of course, Brian Intihar, the creative director, and even Yuri Lowenthal, the actor who played Spider-Man, were referencing a lot during the promotional material for the game. You saw that happen, and you see these things like that in addiction, right? Where you're distancing people, friends, and family because of your addiction to a drug. Of course, the drug being here, the symbiote. I think they portrayed that wonderfully. Because you see these moments where, he says, destroy us during his conversation with Connors when he tells him that it's an alien. You see that symbiote taking hold of him. And we'll talk about this more in a bit. Another aspect that I wanted to talk about was the lizard fight. Now, I know a lot of people love the lizard fight, and I'm especially one of those people because what Insomniac did in that fight was so if you notice in the first game, whenever a boss fight would happen, let's say for Shocker, it was in the bank, right, in Spider-Man PS4. Also for, let's say in Spider-Man PS4, there was a boss fight which involved Rhino and Scorpion, and it was restrictive, right, in one place. I mean, you didn't feel that, but when you go back and play the game, you'll feel that, oh, this fight's restricted, right? What I loved about this game, especially with that lizard fight, was, and of course the final fight with Venom, that it wasn't restricted to one place. You were switching on and off between places, especially running around the city, chasing Lizard all over the place, making a mess of everything. It was fun, especially wearing the black suit. It looked fun. I'm not gonna lie, it was amazing. That fight was great, especially the final fight before we make Connors transform into human. That fight was great. I loved it. I loved the phases that the fights were happening. It was phase 1, phase 2, and so on. It was a blast. I had a fun time playing that. I have no complaints there. But going back to something that happened previous to this, of course, the chase sequence where we're chasing the lizard along with Craven's gang across the harbor. It was a great scene because of course we've seen that part in in the PlayStation Showcase back in May. I think it still had the same impact when I played it. Like I was surprised that it was so late in the game that this part that I've already seen in the showcase in May was so late in the game. I was like, okay, yeah, I've seen this before, but I still think that when we saw that before, I think Insomniac definitely tweaked a little bit because it came in May, so there was still a lot of time before the game released in October. And I feel like the redesign, when you see that back to back and you compare the both of them, you can see how much Insomniac changed a lot of the stuff in the game. From the graphics to how the suit looks, even to the smallest of details. It looks great, and that chase sequence still holds as one of the not the greatest chase scenes, of course, but definitely up there. The river, the quality of the graphics looks great. Yeah, I have no complaints with that. And of course, you see Treater's gradual descent into how the suit affects him. He's giving shit to Miles. Of course, that was always great. That's all great. I love that scene. And then to top it off, you have the Nightmares mission with MJ essentially being chased by Peter, which of course another great addition. A lot of people complain MJ missions are not great, but this shows exactly why. I think I have no complaint with this mission. And yeah, I get the criticism that MJ missions were not exactly, the fan favorite in the first game, not the beloved. But if you count, the game only has 3 of them. There's the one with before Peter gets the symbiote, of course. And there's the second one, this one, then the nightmare sequence where Peter's essentially sleepwalking and chasing MJ around the tunnel. And then the final mission. There are 3 places. And I don't know why. Maybe it was just me. I felt like those missions had kind of a Last of Us kind of a vibe. Maybe it's me, but I had that same vibe when I was playing those missions. But coming back to the nightmare mission with Peter, again, great. Its job was to make us feel scared, and I think it delivered. It delivered big time. Seeing Peter sleepwalking and being like not Venom completely, but being in the control of the symbiote was essentially great. I have no complaints with that mission, and I don't know why people think that mission was not that great. Maybe it wasn't too menacing. I'm like, it's a Spider-Man game. How much menacing do you want me to be? Do you want to be too dark? I mean, it was. I think it had the balance of being essentially as dark as it needs to be with the tone the game was going with. And yeah, it was just great seeing Venom, seeing playing as MJ, taking on those Raven henchmen. It was great. I had no complaints here either. Fun. It was a lot of fun. And finally, coming to Miles fighting Mr. Negative, I kind of saw that coming because I knew when I saw the trailer in the game and I saw Mr. Negative there, I was like, okay, I can see that happening. But again, the boss fight with the phases, again, great. Using your abilities to, penetrate his force field. It was great because if you didn't know, I had a hard time figuring that part out. How do I get through the force field? I'm like, but I have this ability where I can essentially teleport into his shield and kick his ass. So I'm like, I can use that. It took me a while to figure that out, but when I did, man, that boss fight was truly fun. And even not that the VO was great too. I feel like the one thing that they really stepped up with the boss fight is the VO. It's so great, and even if you're not playing the game, you're listening to VO, you can make out that they're having an intense conversation. About Lee being responsible for killing Miles' dad. Of course, he doesn't know that. Of course, he finds out later in the game while we're playing that sequence. But yeah, again, another great boss fight. I have no complaint with this either. The VO is great, the action was great, and of course, Craven was overseeing the whole thing. Another, not scary moment, but another moment with Craven, being less is more. So yeah, it's great. And then we get, of course, when after that we see Peter trying to rescue Miles, and he just. You can see the change in him, right? You see that, especially in this mission, you can see that noticeably here. And then you just jump in, go try to save him, and all of a sudden using symbiote sword out of nowhere, and the VO there is just amazing. Yuri killed it in that scene, especially that intense interrogation, like he's going, "Where?" I'm like, what the hell? It gave me chills because I feel like this is the kind of thing that Batman Arkham Knight did, where he was interrogating henchmen. Like, that's the kind of intensity that Yuri did here, and I gotta say, he just killed it, especially in that when we go inside the building where the fight was happening, and then Craven traps him and all, and he shows what he's done to Miles. He's essentially beating him to a pulp, and you can see the rage in Yuri's eyes. Not Yuri, technically Peter, but the actor playing him. You can see that emotion, and he's totally lost it. And even Miles says that. He says literally, I quote, "Now you're in for it," because he knows that he's taken him to that point where he's like no holds barred, like there's not everything's fair here. And the fight again, a great addition. I thought the fight was great, no problems there. Of course, this fight also had phases and everything, where you were essentially first fighting in the battleground where essentially Mr. Negative and Miles were fighting, and then you transition to somewhere in the back, right, where he has the bell, using the bell to his advantage. Of course, Venom's weakness was sound, right? Yeah, essentially he's using that to essentially defeat you, right? And I thought that was an inventive choice, he bringing his Robocats to fight you. Of course, that was great, and Craven using the element of surprise to kind of take you down. It was a lot of fun. That battles were really fun. And then to essentially transition seamlessly into a boss fight between Peter and Miles. Again, I kind of was expecting that with this game. I did think we were going to have that boss fight. And again, the VO, amazing. If you listen to the VO during that fight, it's essentially Miles trying to bring Peter to come back, calling him back. And you can see that Peter's knee deep into the symbiote. He's completely engulfed by it. You see that. And the VO is just amazing. Najee killed it in this. Najee Jr., the actor who plays Miles Morales, killed it in this role. And especially in this scene, he shines the most. Yeah, I don't know if a lot of people listen to the VO, but the VO was great in these sequences. And then, of course, that iconic, Peter ripping off his symbiote. Pure gold. And I don't know why a lot of people were expecting him when that happened. A lot of people thought that he was gonna rip the symbiote in his face, he would be naked. I was like, why? When he first got the symbiote, he was wearing Spidey clothes, right? Except the mask, of course. If you remember, he was wearing the Spidey clothes. So of course, when he ripped the suit, when he did that, he would be back in his Spidey clothes. I don't get why that people thought that when he ripped his symbiote, he'd be naked. I get that. I get that you guys have seen the Raimi movies, and that's what happened, right? When he ripped the symbiote, he was naked. But this is not the same. I'm sorry, but this is not the same. And yeah, I think there was a great sequence. I have no complaints there. Nothing wrong with that. And the cutscene following that, where Peter says, "Spider-Man didn't save me back there. Miles did." Oh god, the emotion there. You could see that. You could definitely see that as a player. Yeah, amazing sequence. One for the ages. Yeah, again, a great second act. I think everything fits perfectly well here. The gradual, showing of Peter being engulfed with the symbiote, great again. Miles' fight with Mr. Negative, again, a great segment in this. And the boss fights are amazing. Let's talk about Act 3. This is the only act that I have a few problems with, but let's talk about the good first. Good things that I thought were okay. They were great. I think Harry being Venom, essentially, the reveal that he was Venom, I kind of thought that they would, play on that a little bit, because I was like, okay, because they teased that Harry was going to be Venom, and I said, well, that's too obvious, isn't it? I mean, if anything, Insomniac taught us not to expect what we think's gonna happen. I think essentially that's what we did, right? In the first game, if you remember the promotion material for Spider-Man PS4, where they were essentially telling us that Mr. Negative was gonna be the villain and everything. But when we played the game, we saw that Doc Ock was the main villain. They kept Doc Ock's appearance they kept him like, if they hadn't shown any of his scenes, anything like that. They hadn't even shown his character in the game, in the promotional material for the game. That was a surprise, and the reveal that he was the villain, it totally caught many people off guard. They were not expecting that, and I thought with this game they were gonna do something similar, where they were gonna, in the trailer, they were gonna like reference somebody else being Venom, maybe Harry, but that's what they did. But that's what they did in the gameplay trailer, right? They showed that Harry and Venom were saying essentially the same thing, where they were saying we're going to heal the world, and everybody thought, is that Harry? Because that's what he says, right? And I'm like, are they making it too obvious to then do a complete 180 and that somebody else will be the host? Now, I wasn't expecting Eddie Brock to show up, because that was already confirmed that there's no Eddie Brock in this game. Brian Hintar, the creative director, did reveal that before the game released, like a few months, I think, before the game released, that it's not Eddie Brock. He confirmed it definitely. So I was like, okay, it's not Eddie Brock. But of course, Insomniac loves to do misdirections, So I was like, maybe they want us to believe that Harry is Venom so that they can do a totally 180, but how exactly? So I had a few hosts in my mind. Of course, there was one that was being Peter. He was gonna end up being Venom, which was reasonable, We've seen Peter become Venom in the Ultimate Spider-Man game. Then there was another one I thought was floating around, most popularly was Norman. And I was like, I could see that happening, I do see that happening. I can see that happening. Because Norman, again, would be a great host to Venom, I think. Because we've never seen that before. I'm like, yeah, I think they could do a creative liberty here and make Norman Venom. But when I played it, I was like, okay, I was expecting that, but I thought that Insomniac would do some creative liberties here. But yeah, okay, I was like, okay, fine, he's Venom. All right, let's move on. I was like, okay, but I was expecting something special there. I don't know what exactly. Maybe my expectations were too high, right there, or maybe I was setting myself up for disappointment. But I would love to take your honest takes. I mean, honest thoughts on this. That were you expecting Harry to be Venom? I guess you were, because you saw the trailer for the game. But did you think that they would do a misdirection here and pull somebody else to play? Showing somebody else being Venom and then do a complete 180 when we were playing the game? I don't know. Just something to ponder on, I guess. But I gotta say, one thing that I did enjoy was playing as Venom. Oh my god. When we got that part, I was like, let's freaking go. because I was not expecting that. I mean, I wanted it to be in the game, and I was very happy they included the inclusion of playing as Venom. I was like, this is one of the highlights of the game. Like, wow, they're letting us play as Venom. I was like, yes, let's go. And the moves were like not half-assed; they were great. You could see him bite people. You could essentially see him like do Venom stuff. Essentially, you know, if I was gonna put that in one sentence, do stuff Venom essentially does in the comics. You know, I was like, I am so glad they put this in the game. I was so happy when that happened. I was like, yeah, let's go. And not only that, they made us fight as Craven. I was like, what? I didn't even think about this. I was like, are they gonna do that? Because I thought if there was gonna be something like that, I would have thought that they would have teamed up or something. But no, they fought. I was so surprised with that fight sequence, and what made it more compelling was that when you were playing as Venom and fighting Craven, it was so much easier to beat him, because when you were playing as Spidey fighting Craven, I found it to be much harder than this part. You were playing as Venom and you were essentially kicking his ass completely. I don't know why. Maybe it's just me that found that, but I don't know if a lot of people found that part. But yeah, I was so engrossed by that fight sequence. And the VO as well. Again, the VO is always amazing in the game, especially in the boss fights. But man, that fight was amazing. And then they do kill him off. I'm like, what? You half the game you were showing Craven to be that menace, and then you just essentially kill him off. I'm like, are you serious? They killed off Craven just like that? I was not expecting that boss fight, essentially. Nope. I did not expect that. I can swear to God, I was not expecting that boss fight. And yeah, I was totally waiting to be surprised there. Completely. And if you talk about the symbiote henchmen, of course, and that was introduced in the game, I gotta say, that essentially gave me Web of Shadows vibes. We'll talk more about that in a bit, but yeah, those symbiote henchmen were like, yeah, I was glad that there were many more variety to them, right? There was the one that you couldn't essentially strike because you would just dodge that, and then the green one, of course. And there were, of course, the normal ones you could fight. And of course, the most notable one was the Brute, the symbiote Brute, that really gave you a hard time fighting those. And yeah, I think those symbiote henchmen were a great addition to the villains' rogue gallery in the game. I had a blast with all of them. A notable thing that I was glad that was in the game was the dinner table sequence. If you know, you know, of course, because this is where you essentially see Harry trying to recruit Peter to join him, that you're coming with me. This has to stop. You have to come with me. I'm not giving you anything. And this is the first time we hear "We are Venom." I was like, whoa, that was great. I have no complaints there. And then the reveal that MJ scream, I'm like, what? Again, another creative liberty, but I totally get that. I mean, MJ has red hair, I get it. And the costume that not the costume, but the clothes she's wearing definitely showcase a Scream kind of symbiote transformation there. And I'm like, wow, they really went with creative liberty here. Especially when you fight MJ as Scream in that boss fight. You listen to the VO, it's like, I think it's amazing. I mean, I've been talking about Yuri Lowenthal as well, but I gotta say, Laura Bailey killed it. I mean, Laura Bailey, of course, the actress who plays MJ, she killed it in that scene, especially in that scene, because the VO is great. It's essentially what Miles did to Peter when Peter was being controlled by the symbiote. Here, MJ is being controlled by a symbiote, and she's hashing it all out. You know, everything that the consequences of Peter being Spider-Man. She's laying it all on the table, and Peter's like pulling her back essentially. But she takes the last step, you know, to free herself from the symbiote. I think the VO was great, and Laura Bailey has to be credited here. Her performance here was amazing. I can't rant more about it. I think everything was great here. And of course, the phases of the fight, which of course I've talked about before, where you were just essentially going to different neighborhoods with her boss fight. I have no complaints here. And the VO was, of course, like I said, amazing. The mission following this, you know, the one where we fight near the courthouse, I did not expect Lee to come to Peter's help like that. Peter and Miles' help. Maybe that's his arc, you know, to transform him to a good guy, which of course you always love to see a great arc. And I was like, when they joined hands and went into Peter's head, I was like, this is how you reform a villain. This is how you show he can be good too. I was like, wow, they really delved into that. I wasn't expecting that, but they did it. And of course, how can we forget about the introduction of Anti-Venom? I was like, because when that happened, actually, I'll tell you that I had a feeling that was going to happen when I was like, when they were going into his mind, I was like, you know what? He's already in the covered in the symbiote. Peter's already being covered in the symbiote again, and they're going into his head. And I have heard in the comics that that's how Anti Venom was born. Of course, Anti-Venom was more in part of Eddie Brock's story in the comics, where Mr. Negative essentially cures his cancer, but remnants of Mr. Negative's powers stay in Eddie Brock's system. So when the Venom tries to take him back as a host, he becomes Anti-Venom. But here, of course, we see a different interpretation of that comic book lore, where Martin Lee goes into Peter's head, and to clear off the symbiote, he transfers his energy to him, essentially. And he gets an Anti-Venom suit to counteract the Venom symbiote. Again, great creative liberty, and when the Anti-Venom suit pops out, you can just be like, let's frickin' go. And the abilities, again, amazing. No complaints there. I was really pumped with that scene. I was like, yes, we finally got the symbiote powers back, because I was a bit pissed, essentially, that the abilities were gone now, because the symbiote was gone, of course, but they gave us back. They gave it back. I was like, yes, finally, yes. Coming back to the Web of Shadows thing, I mean, you clearly see that comparison, you know. In the next mission, we see the city completely engulfed by the tendrils all around, you know, rooftops and skyscrapers, and essentially across the whole street. You see that symbiote infestation. There's tendrils everywhere, and you see that Web of Shadows comparison there, right? You've seen that before, and again, great segment, great set pieces. Yeah, I have no complaints to hear either. And finally, the final boss fight with, you know, Peter, Miles, and MJ essentially fighting Venom together. I mean, it was only Peter and Miles, but MJ also pulled their own weights and everything. Yeah, I have no complaints here either. I think the boss fight was great, and the VO, of course, is always great, but here also it shines. You know, Peter and Harry having a conversation, you know. Harry's like, why are you doing this and everything? And Peter's like, we gotta get this thing off of you and everything. I think the final mission was great. I had no complaints here. The only problem that I find in this act is, like, I feel like this could have been stressed out. I feel like this act could have benefited from 2 to 3 more missions. Why? I feel like we didn't flesh out Venom as much as we should have. I mean, we get his motivation. He wants to heal the world and all in his own effed up way. But I think there could have been more missions to flesh him out. Maybe it's me. I just feel like we haven't fleshed it out in this act, because this is the act we get introduced to him. And this act just finishes so quickly. I don't know why. Maybe I'm complaining a lot here, but yeah, I gotta say, I do think they would have benefited with a little more mission in this act specifically. And not only that, I heard that there was, like, I've seen it in a concept art, you can clearly see that there was a mission, or there was an idea of a mission, at least, symbiote infestation in the Daily Bugle. And I was like, why didn't you use this? You could have put this in this act. It would have made sense, you know, to see it from Jonah's perspective, which was, again, a great addition to, especially that Sandman, after that Sandman boss fight, you see that the VIP that was traveling was Jonah, and he essentially carrying him back to the hospital again. A moment of humor. But I feel like they could have made more missions here. I don't know, maybe it's me. But yeah. And then talking about the final scene in the game, you know, with Peter essentially taking a break from being Spider-Man, it makes sense because he's been Spider-Man for essentially 9 years now. And I'm like, it makes sense for Peter to take a break and essentially being like, I want to be Peter Parker for a while. And Miles tells him, you should go be Peter Parker. And Miles is ready to take that leap of being full-time Spider-Man, you know? I think it was a great character arc there. No complaints here. Let's talk about the post-credit scenes, of course. I think the integration of Doc Ock and Otto, again, great scene. I was kind of surprised that when I saw the Brian Edwards interview with Kind of Funny Games, where he talked about how this post-credit scene kind of was like, always going to be there, you know? An idea of that was already there when he was making Spider-Man PS4. Again, great scene. I was not expecting him, but I was not surprised that he was there. I think Doc Ock was still a great villain for Spider-Man PS4, and I would love to see him come back in any capacity he can. He was great. Also, coming back to not the post-credit scene, but the end scene where Harry is lying and you see Green Goblin essentially saying to someone on the phone to get the G serum ready. Of course, G serum being the Goblin serum. That's pretty obvious. So I feel like if he's using the G serum, I would say that he might use it on Harry. maybe to save his life again, or he could be talking about himself, and we could finally get the Green Goblin in this game. I have no idea how this is going to shape out. I could see the cheese room either ending up with Harry or with Norman, but I think it's gonna be Norman because we want to see that Green Goblin thing. And I know that Harry's also been the Green Goblin in the comics, but I think he had his moment to shine in this part of the story. And to see him come back as a villain again seems repetitive, you know? We've had that with Venom now. So I think it is time for Norman to shine, finally. I think he has to. And this is it. He'll be Green Goblin for the sequel. Whenever that happens. And then moving on to, of course, the final post-credit scene. I think you guys know what I'm talking about. Cindy Moon. Yeah, I did not expect that. That took me completely. I was like, whoa. They're introducing Cindy Moon, aka Silk. I was like, what? That totally caught me off guard. Not expecting that. When I saw the trailer that was leading up to the release, and I saw that Rio was dating someone, and we finally see Albert Moon at the doorstep, and I'm like, are they hinting Cindy now? Of course, they don't show the face because I would assume that the face isn't ready. The voice actress and everything's not ready there yet, which I get. But yeah, another surprise from Insomniac. If this is what I think is going to be, we could essentially see 3 Spider-Man in Spider-Man 3. You know, with Peter, Miles, and Cindy being there. I was like, 3 protagonists? 3 main characters? Is it too much? I'm like, okay. I'm excited. Don't get me wrong, I am excited, but 3 people in a game? I don't know, man. I mean, if GTA 5 can do it, I know that's a pretty big comparison. If GTA 5 can flesh out 3 protagonists in a game, why can't Insomniac? I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt here. If they can pull it off, go ahead. I say go all in with this. I think Cindy would be a great addition to the cast. I'm excited for what's next for Spider-Man 3, whatever that happens, but I'm very excited with that one. So yeah, again, a great act, but I think that there could have been more missions in this act. Maybe I'm asking for too much, but 1 to 3 more missions could have really benefited with this act because I feel like this act's short, and I don't know why it's too short like that. But yeah, I do think there could have been more missions. Essentially, that's the only problem I have here. Otherwise, everything else looks great in this act. Now, let's talk about the side missions. I think my most favorite were the Howard side mission. Again, a great way to, it was a great sequence of, flying around with the birds. That music was, again, a great choice by Insomniac. Wow, that music was like, it made you emotional like that. And yeah, no complaints with this mission. I think it's a great side mission. There's no complaints here. I mean, yeah, you kind of miss chasing the birds in Spider-Man PS4 maybe, and some people might think it was irritating in that game, and if it was irritating, I think this would make them happy as well, the people who thought it was irritating. But essentially, I was happy with this mission. It was emotional, it was fun. Yeah, and the music again, it just enhanced everything. And the Grandpa side mission, again, it shows what it means to be a Spider-Man essentially. I mean, Spider-Man's not all, web swinging and climbing. This is why Spider-Man is a great comic book hero, great media icon as well. Because he's not just Spider-Man because he has these powers. His essence of being a Spider-Man is greatly captured in this side mission essentially. Someone who's a hero who listens to normal people like a grandpa, having an existential crisis. Not crisis per se, but thinking about the old days, thinking about the love of his life. It's amazing. And it's simple things like that that make Spider-Man so great. Yeah, I have no complaint with this mission either. Insomniac deserves all the praises for these side missions. I think another side mission that I really loved was Monster and Queens, where you essentially are protecting a RoboCat from Craven's other RoboCats who are kind of like turned on Craven's enemies. And he's essentially like a pet, you could say, a robot pet. I thought the mission was really cute, especially at the end of the mission, you kind of drop the RoboCat with the elderly person, and I'm like, wow. I mean, talk about, that I don't know what to say about this mission, but I think it makes it a great addition to all the side missions that are in the game. I really had a fun time playing the side mission. But let's talk about my top 3 side missions in this game, which I thought were perfect, at least in my opinion. There's the unidentified side mission where you are essentially following the drones, especially you're like web gliding through them and you're flying around the city with them and everything, and the various identities you were picking out from these drones, and they revealed that it's the chameleon. I was like, whoa. I mean, the chameleon was referenced in the first game, so I was like, okay, they're referencing him. But what I did not expect was the chameleon was Craven's brother. I was like, what? his adopted brother. I was like, whoa, this is like, are you kidding me? If you've read a comic, then you know that it's true, but I did not know about that part. The fact, I was like, what? So are they hyping him up for this third game or in a DLC maybe? I was like, okay. Yeah, I was not expecting that reveal again. It's a great side mission, of course. And his apartment looked great, especially if you go to the piano in the apartment, you could listen to the Web of Shadows theme in that piano. I was like, wow, that's a great callback. Yeah, we talk about these games and how these Easter eggs are filled all around the world, and I'm like, that's a great Easter egg, and I could see a lot of shorts around online using that as referencing that. I was like, wow, amazing. My second favorite side mission was the Spider-Verse collectibles, where you were collecting these spider trackers all around the city. And at the end of that side mission, you could essentially talk to Delilah. I was like, whoa, they referenced Miguel here. And you know what? My eyebrows really went up here because if you've seen Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, you see that cameo sequence where you can see Insomniac Spider-Man there. And I'm like, does this happen before this or after this? Because this scene makes it look like that happened after this. I'm like, is that canon or not? Is this canon or is this just for fun? But again, if you've done all those collectibles, it was a great, surprise for people to see that happen, to have that connection with the Spider-Verse movie. Yeah, and I really enjoyed those collectibles too, because if you look at those collectibles carefully, you can make out, there's a Spider-Gwen tracker, there's a Spider-Punk tracker. There are these different trackers like that. I'm like, wow, they really designed these trackers to, make them look like their spider counterparts. Yeah, I think the artists deserve all the praise for their work in those trackers and associating with the characters they belong to. And I have no complaints here. But I think the GOAT in these all list of all side missions in the game, and I think most people universally agree with me, come on, is the Flame. I mean, I did not expect Carnage to be introduced in the game like that. I mean, I didn't expect there to be Carnage, period. I was like, what? Are you kidding me? This is how you're gonna introduce Carnage in the game? I was like, what? And of course, Yuri being there, continuing her story from Spider-Man PS4 and the City That Never Sleeps DLC, of course, from the first game, which was also, again, a great touch by Insomniac. But yeah, I did not expect that Carnage reveal. Now, I'm not sure if this is Cletus Cassidy. Of course, when you listen to Yuri after finishing that mission, she names a few number of aliases, and one of them is Cletus Cassidy. But we don't know if this is his. I mean, he's called the Flame, but I don't know. I don't know what his real name is. Maybe it is Cletus Cassidy because he does have the red hair. He's sporting the iconic red hair. And Cletus does have red hair in the comics. And you can assume that he's Cletus, that's okay. But I don't think Insomniac confirmed that yet. So he could be anybody. Cletus Cassidy could just be an Easter egg there. But yeah, this has made me really excited for the DLC content because I know that there's going to be a DLC for this game. Now, I'm not sure when it's going to be. But yeah, I do know for a fact there's going to be DLC for this game. And I know that they're going to come back to this in that DLC. I don't know which one, but I do know that. And this has me really excited because if you get to fight as Carnage, I'm like, bro, that is really going to get my expectations really high. So yeah, I think this mission is clearly the GOAT in all the side missions. And I put it at the top for my own preference. But I get it if you have a different preference, and let me know if I missed any side mission yet you think should have warranted making in this list. But this is my top side missions. The only criticism I have with this part of the game, I think that there could have been more side missions. Maybe it's my take here. Because if you remember the first game, I think there was a lot more fun things to do around the city than in this game. And yeah, maybe one could make an argument that, you were essentially solving like different types of crimes in those first game to, fill that district completion kind of a thing. But you weren't trying to 100% of the whole district and you had to fight like 5 different crimes for different type of henchmen. So I get it that, that becomes repetitive, but I think they could have done like 1 or 2 more side missions here. Maybe it's me, I feel like they could have put more side missions, but again, Brian and Tar did say that if we don't reach a certain quality in the side mission, then we're not going to do it. Because I feel like you can only give so much engaging content to players, and at that level And I get that. I completely get that. I think that's fine. But I do think they could have benefited with one or two more side missions at most. But yeah, I think they could have done more side missions here. That's just my take here. But everything else is fine. I think all the side missions are great. Overall, the game is amazing and I have almost no complaints other than the inclusion of 1 to 3 missions in the third act, as well as the inclusion of a little more side content. Feel free to write in the comment section if you think I missed anything or if you want to put forth reasons why these two criticisms may not resonate with you, or you may not agree with them. As I said, this is an open forum, so let me know your thoughts if you have any. And that is it for this video, guys. Feel free to use the comment section to voice your thoughts or opinions on anything that you thought regarding the same. And make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more content ahead. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.